Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. And today I want to talk about a very special series. It is the Advertisements for Love series by Vanessa Riley. So this is a really interesting series because Vanessa Riley is actually one of the very few Black authors writing romance novels set in Regency England. So I was very interested as soon as I found out about her and her books to read them and to see, what they were all about. She also has a new book coming out. What I want to do in this video is kind of give you some quick summaries of the tropes and the plots of the books, review the books themselves, and then kind of go into some of the historical significance of the work that Vanessa Riley is doing in these books. So I do have all 4 of the books, but there's only 3 in here because the second one I bought it as an ebook, so I only have 3 of the physical copies. Okay. The first book in the series is The Bittersweet Bride, and this was actually my least favorite of the books in the series. It is the story of Theo and Ewan. Theo, or Theodosia, she has a son. So that is one of the main reasons why this was one of my least favorite books. I hate when there are I hate when there are children in romance novels, but that's a personal taste thing. And our hero and the heroine Theo had a relationship when they were younger. However, Ewan went away to war and he disappeared. So he was presumed dead at war. In the meantime, Theo got married and raised her son. Her husband then passed away. Now Ewan is back from war, and basically it's a second chance romance. Our main heroine is a blackamoor, which is the phrasing that Vanessa Riley likes to use, and it was a term used at the time for Black people in England in particular. So she's Black and she'd been on the street for a long time, but she's been basically making it on her own. She has survived by selling flowers. Ewan's family is in the flower growing and selling business, and so there's that connection there. She's a very savvy businesswoman. She's taken over her husband's flower business essentially, and she has improved it significantly, so much so that she competes and often beats Ewan's family. One of the reasons why they hadn't gotten together and why Ewan was sent away to war is that his family does not approve of her because she's Black. And so Ewan doesn't care about that. Because he wanted his father's approval for the marriage, he basically went to war, right? He was said the deal he made with his dad was that if he went off to war, he came back, like basically his dad wasn't going to be able to prevent him from marrying Theo. All right, so one of the things that I noticed right from the start with this book was that Vanessa Riley is really great about writing female characters. Like, she writes these Black, strong, vulnerable, like wonderful women. Just does a wonderful job. Another thing that I noticed throughout the series is in her writing is that she writes with a kind of older style. Like, she tries to write in the style of the time, like the sentence structure in which people would have talked in Regency England. Not entirely, but there's that there. So that took me a while to get the hang of. Like, at first it just really presented a barrier for me getting into the story. But then once I got halfway through the book, I really got into the story, and then I did not have a problem with any of the other books in terms of the writing style. Theo's son is disabled. He has a disability, and that's another one of the criticisms I have of this book is that his disability is seen as a bad thing, as something that needs correcting, that's gonna hurt him. It just read quite ableist even to me. This is not an Own Voices review of that, but just beware of that if you want to pick up this first book. The second book was The Bashful Bride, in which we follow the story of Esther Kroon and Arthur Brex. This story really captured me from the beginning. Esther is a wealthy woman, a wealthy Black woman. Her father is in the garment, textile business, and so they're quite wealthy. Still, because they're Black, they're kind of not accepted in some circles within London. Arthur Brex is an actor though, and he is also an abolitionist. And this is where whereas I didn't fully like Ewan in the first book, I should have made that clear. Ewan is a total asshole throughout that entire book here, and there's a lot of miscommunication, lack of communication, which is another thing I really don't like in romance novels. And he basically did not deserve Thea. In the second book, Arthur Brex totally deserves Esther. Like, just the way that they're written is so much better. I love Esther, and I particularly like Arthur Brex. So he's an actor and an abolitionist. The main conflict in the story is about the dangers around his abolitionist activism, and there's a little bit of like forced conflict with that topic at the end, which I didn't quite like, but otherwise I really enjoyed the story. It's also the one of the other tropes in here is Esther is being forced into a marriage that she doesn't want, and that is why she chooses to elope with Arthur Brex. Anyways, enough of that story. Really enjoyed like 80% of the book. There was a little section at the end there with like the miscommunication and the conflict that was not exactly my cup of tea, but otherwise I really enjoyed the story of Esther and Arthur. Book number 3 is the Butterfly Bride. This is the story of Frederica and Jasper. So Jasper is Ewan's brother. So Ewan from the first book. The other thing that kind of connects all these stories is that all of these women are friends. They're in the same friend group. Frederica is a wealthy black woman, the daughter of a duke who has acknowledged her. So her mother was a courtesan, but the duke doesn't have any other children, and he actually really cares for Frederica. So he acknowledged her, and she has grown up in the house of her father, the Duke. He runs his household, but he has recently gotten married, and Frederica understands that her place in the home is about to change, and she wants her own home. She wants to run her own house. Enter Jasper. Jasper is in the same friend group, so this is really kind of a friends to lover story where they've been kind of quietly falling in love in the background of the other books. Here, finally, Riley is focusing on them, on their story, and if you remember, Ewan's one of the barriers for Ewan and Theo in the first book was the dad not approving. So that is one of the things that they need to overcome in this book, because Jasper is the oldest child and the heir for his father, but so that actually ends up not playing as big of a role here as Jasper being a widower. Jasper's a widower. He has 2 daughters, and he doesn't think he's ready for love, and Frederica wants love. She wants a marriage with love in it, and it is a super cute, really adorable story. I really enjoyed like the entirety of it here, and like, even though I don't like stories with children in them, or romance novels with children in them, this one worked for me because the children are mostly in the background, so they don't like interfere, even though they are talked about and it is part of the story. But that was super adorable. And lastly, my favorite book in the series is The Bewildered Bride. This is the story of Ruth and Adam. So once again, we do have a second chance romance here with Ruth and Adam actually married. They had run off to Gretna Green, gotten married, and on the way back, they were attacked by some of Adam's enemies. They each think that the other one died in that attack. It has now been a few years later. They are both back in London, and Adam finds her. But Ruth isn't the same. Ruth is losing her vision, and she's at the point where, like, when she first lays eyes on Adam, he has changed enough, and because she believes him to be dead, that she just doesn't recognize him as like the love of her life. So Adam must basically make Ruth fall in love with him again. There was a son in this story, also kind of in the background, and a few things here that throughout the whole series, Riley just became a much better writer and handled a lot of these tropes so much better. Whereas like in the first one, it really rang a bit ableist to me. In this last one, her losing her vision is not treated as like the worst thing in the world, her life has ended or anything like that. No, there are like steps, things she can do. She's like learning to, you know, put everything, not move things around the house so that the house layout, everything's predictable. She does have glasses she wears. Like it's handled so much better than the disability in the first book was handled. And it was just thinking cute. There was a lot of chemistry between the two main characters, and because they're already married, like the scenes can get a little spicy earlier on. So those are the 4 books in the Advertisements for Love series. So I want to go through a few things in the story. So first of all, I think that the series gets better as it moves on. This is also a good series for people who don't like a lot of sex scenes in their romance novels. There are basically like 0 sex scenes. They basically, there's some kissing and touching, and then there's like the fade to black. Even after like the couples get married, we don't get any explicit sex scenes on the page. So if that is something you like, this is a good series for you. Personally, like I want it to be more explicit, but I still enjoyed the series. The series can also be a bit melodramatic, and that is not one of my favorite tropes. They are especially melodramatic at the beginning. Later on, I felt like there was melodrama, but it was like it wasn't as jarring, and it just got better. Like I think this is where like Riley just got better as a writer writing this series. So now let me talk about kind of the central theme here. One of the main things that happens when writers write people of color in historical periods, one of the main criticisms they get is that it is not historically accurate. And this is the hill that I will die on. And in fact, there were wealthy Black people in England. How did these people get here? Well, some of them were former slaves, but a lot of them were not. A lot of them were, the sons and family members of African leaders who were in trade and negotiations with the British. A lot of them sent their kids to England to study. Many chose to stay. Others are a mixed heritage, sometimes from the Caribbean, who are able to make their way to England. Usually it involves kind of wealthier connections in England. And so you have a whole range of Black people in England. The estimates, Riley gives them to us at the back, by the way, is somewhere between 10 and 20,000 is some of the agreed upon numbers, though it's really hard to measure how many Black people existed in Europe during some of these periods, because there wasn't the same kind of keeping track of people. And so some estimates are higher, some estimates are lower, but that range that Riley gives us is about right. The other thing I want to point out is a lot of people, when you say, hey, this is actually having Black characters falling in love in Regency England, it's not. It is historically accurate. And one of the things people say is, why didn't I learn this in school? And as a history professor, I want to say a couple of things about this. One, some people did learn this in school and just you didn't remember it. Probably because you didn't have very good history teachers that maybe were boring, made you memorize a whole bunch of facts and dates. And you just don't remember them making this material very interesting. Some people really did not learn it, and that actually has to do with the racism within the academy, right? That the amount of people getting masters and PhDs in history for a long time has been primarily white. And that has an effect throughout the whole education system, because it means that the research being done is being done by primarily white people that are not interested in researching issues of race. That has been changing in the last like 20 years, and especially more recently, where there have been many more people of color getting PhDs and master's degrees in history. That means that they're doing the research necessary to give us a lot of this information. Some of it, though, was really obvious and was just being ignored by scholars. It was largely white scholars ignoring the existence of Black people in these periods. One of the accounts I really like to follow is Medieval POC. That's their handle on Twitter. They go through and they show you the presence, the existence of Black people in medieval Europe by looking at the art and the illuminations, which are like the really beautiful like art designs in books. And they are often depicting people of color because guess what? Europe was not isolated from the rest of the world. They were engaged in trade with the Middle East, with Africa, with Asia. And so people were intermingling and moving around, especially if you were in like a major European city. Right. So a few things, if you are interested in this topic of people of color, especially Black people in Europe, I recently did a review of Venus Noir, Black Women in Colonial Fantasies in 19th Century France. So this one's France specific, but it gives you some individual people to look at, you know, and gets you started looking at some of this history. So this one's by Robin Mitchell. It's short and it's really, really excellent. Another book that I haven't read myself, but the historian is very good, is Black and British, A Forgotten History by David Olusoga. That one is a longer book, so it's much more comprehensive. It has a ton of information, but it is also kind of written in a way that is accessible to a wider audience. Lastly, it's a book that hasn't been released yet. It's one I'm keeping my eye out because it's a historian I've been following for a while, and her work is excellent, so I can't wait to read this book. It is African Europeans and Untold History by Olivette Otele. That is so excellent, and I do recommend following that account, Medieval POC on Twitter, because they do a really good job of constantly like giving you examples of people of color in the Middle Ages. And my goodness, if they were there in the Middle Ages, they were there in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. Okay. I want to end coming back to the Vanessa Riley series, Advertisements for Love. One thing that I didn't mention was that one of the themes in each of these books is that, you know, one of the characters in the stories is basically writing an ad to find a significant other that then gets published, and then they get letters written to them. So if you don't like that, then maybe this is not the series for you. I also think that more advanced romance readers might not like some of these books, and it's not necessarily because of the inclusion of Black people. It's just because of the lack of explicit sex scenes and some of the tropes. And that's why I made an effort to go through the tropes, because I think with romance, tropes really do matter, because there is so many different romance novels to choose from. Also, if you're interested of the project that Vanessa Riley is engaged with here of writing people of color during the period in which people usually don't get written about, I'm wondering about her new book. I just purchased it, so I'll be reading it soon, and I'll give you a full review on that. But because I have seen her writing get so much better in this series, I think maybe this is the book to start with. A Duke, the Lady, and a Baby. So clearly, Vanessa Riley likes writing children in her romance novels as well. She likes widowers, and she likes to write really just the way she writes characters is really, really fantastic. So most of the books in the Advertisements for Love series were 3.5 to 4 stars for me. So I do recommend them, but I also want to be careful I also want to be direct about the tropes that are in here, because I don't want to recommend this to somebody who, like, you know, doesn't normally read historical romances, and is, you're gonna read it just because, um, you know it includes people of color, and then you're going to be disappointed in the tropes that you get. So I think whenever you pick up a romance novel, you have to be interested in something in it. Usually it's the tropes that call to you. But I really love the project of Vanessa Riley's stories here. I think that there should be more books like this written. We should have more Black romance writers writing historical romances, especially in Regency England. Like, seriously, like, it's hard for me to even like give you a list of all the Black writers writing in this particular era and genre, because there just are not a lot, and she's one of the few doing it, and doing a fantastic job of it. Vanessa Riley herself is also just hilarious. If you ever get a chance to like watch or go to an event, or like watch her in any like online event, she's fantastic. She is someone who is fantastic in panels and discussions, and just really funny, really warm person, and I've really gotten to like her a lot, and I'm happy to talk about her series. So if you have any questions, please leave them down below. I'm happy to answer anything about the history, or even about the books themselves. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.